What I wanted to talk about tonight was a little bit about what happened there and what the significance was. And one of the things that the youth here, the young children of Galingbati, talked about was this urban redevelopment and what was happening to their space and how they wanted to preserve it. And this is the same kind of struggle that happened with the I-Hotel. It was the young and the old, and probably with their parents, struggling together to keep their place, keep their home, keep their school, keep all of that. And so what was happening at that time was financial considerations of this downtown area, which was mainly to make it into office space. And from Market all the way down to Kearney Street, they kept at redeveloping all of the different blocks to the point where in 1968, the last block was the International Hotel of the Manila town area. So, who were the elderly? What were they doing? Why did they say, we don't want to move? And that's what they were saying. If we don't have to move, we would still have this place, right? And so that's what people were talking about in that time period. We don't want to move. We want to stay here. We want to preserve our community. And it was fortuitous at a time in '68, which was the time that there was an upsurge of minority peoples, young people, students coming together to help with their communities. And so the elderly said, please help us. And so the youth came, okay? And it was because of that intergenerational struggle that the anti-eviction movement lasted for 10 years, okay? We made alliances with a lot of different kinds of people, and those alliances were even with the sheriff, with the mayor, and politicians, but also there was a grassroots movement, which is probably the time in which people thought of grassroots at the time, which means that people organized from the base. And that was probably one of the major struggles that happened in the 70s, okay? Now, this book, which I wrote a chapter, Filipino Americans in the Decade of the International Hotel, is historical essays, personal accounts of people who were in the movement during that decade, from 1968 to 1978. So 68, most people know, is like the upsurge of young people. These were the baby boomers who came of age and became a part of a progressive movement. And why 1978 then was because that was the time when Mayor Moscone and Harvey Milk were assassinated, and also the time when Jim Jones, you know, had his, I guess I don't know if you call it massacre, but the suicides, deaths of, you know, People's Temple Church. People's Temple Church was part of this coalition, and Jim Jones was the housing commissioner during that time. And it was at that time period also there was a lot of, you know, repression going on, and so he felt like he would take his church there, okay? But we continued, even though we got evicted in 1977, and the community still got together, and this is after 25 years later, this place goes up in 2005. So it was because of people struggling this long that you have a place like this, okay? So let me just give you some sense of who these people were, okay? I was part of the organization called the KDP, which is Union of Democratic Filipinos, and we had a KDP team. In fact, I was part of this team, Emil de Guzman and Jeanette Lazam back there sitting great, raise your hand. And so we were part of that generation that united with this older folks, okay? And some of those people were either children of Manongs, okay, or in the case of myself, I was a child of a World War II veteran, okay? So I came in the 50s. Emil was born in San Francisco, and Jeanette was born in New York. So you get a sense of who we were. We didn't really, I don't think either one of us knew how to speak Tagalog, you know. We spoke English very well. And it was at that time when no one, you know, it was one of those things where you had to assimilate to the white culture, otherwise you couldn't get further. And that's why our parents would tell us not to speak our language. Okay? So that's kind of like who we were. So we were looking for our identity. And during that time period of 68 to 70s, people were looking for their identity. And where did they find it? They found it with the elders who were in this community. And so there was that special bond. And then the elderly, some of them did not have families. So we were their children. You know, they were my uncles and aunts. Okay? And let me just talk about a little about who the elderly were who were in this iHotel movement. A lot of people know who Felix Eisen was because he was very, he spoke a lot. He did speeches, and you see him in the iHotel movie by Curtis Choi. Felix Eisen was born in 1894 and graduated high school and joined the U.S. Armed Forces during World War I and returned to fight again in World War II. So many of these guys were veterans of both wars. Manong Felix was a school teacher before the war, and he came to America to further his education, but he ran out of money and was forced to work in the fields and canneries. He became a union organizer, staying at the iHotel periodically since 1926. So at 68, by 1968, he had been staying at the iHotel periodically since 1926. So that's a long time. He became a union organizer, staying at the iHotel. After the war, he went to school to become an electrical engineer under the GI Bill. He married a Creole woman from New Orleans, but he couldn't make a living because of discrimination and ended up working as an elevator operator. His wife died in a car accident a few years before he moved into the hotel permanently in 1969. Frankie Alarcon had been a sailor and traveled all over the world. If you watched the iHotel movie by Curtis Choi, you will see Al Robles talking to him, and Al Robles will be, did you see his photo album? I got a girl in Canton, I got a girl in, have you remember that one? And you keep turning the page, and so that was Frankie. And every Sunday, we used to have these brunches. You know, you break bread with each other. That's one of the ways that you organize, is you break bread with each other, meaning you eat together. That's part of our culture. So we did that, plus we danced. And we danced together, and someone wrote a poem, I think it was Susan Ancheta, I forget, from one of the groups in Kearny Street. And we danced, and I learned how to do the swing with him. So we would do this every Sunday, and so, but I haven't done it a lot since because there was no opportunity to dance, but they loved to dance. That was one of the things they loved to do. It made them happy because that was, well, it's a fun thing to dance anyway, but they loved it. So we did that every Sunday. And Wahat, people remember Wahat Tampao, so that's him right there speaking. He did a lot of speeches also. He was one of the Manons who stepped forward to lead. He served in the U.S. Navy from 1928 to 1949, and he first stayed at the International Hotel in 1929, making it his permanent home in 1963. Manong Wahat was from the tribal peoples in the Philippines. He was proud of his heritage and refused to be embarrassed because of his accent. So he used to speak just like the rest of immigrant Filipinos who have a Filipino accent, and he was never ashamed of that, you know, because he felt the struggle was too important to be, you know, to communicate and not, you know, and to be afraid to speak out, even if it was broken English, you know. And so, you know, I remember, you know, bringing him to rallies, and he would always speak. And there was one time when he was wearing his tribal gear from the Benguet tribe, and you know, he was very proud of that. And he didn't care that people would laugh and snicker, you know, because, you know, it's like, it's just a bahag, you know, and a G-string kind of thing. And so all of us, these elderly who were past 60s, and myself as 20s, we were there for 10 years. Now, a lot of times when you're young, 1 year seems like a long time, you know, but we were there consistently, and, you know, we paid for it, but it was a trauma. It was a trauma when we were evicted that night. And you know, I wrote here Jeanette's story because she was with Wahat during the eviction, and how he felt and how he cried, and she felt so helpless, and it was something that I remember. So I put it here, the story in this chapter. For the first time ever since I started living and organizing in the I Hotel, I couldn't offer the tenants encouragement. This was right after the eviction. I couldn't offer them hope that our hotel would be saved. I felt so totally helpless. By 5 o'clock in the morning was all over. I walked out of the hotel arm in arm with Wahat, leader of the IHTA. We walked out the front door. He turned to look at the hotel and fell on his knees, sobbing like a child. Wahat had been one of the strongest people I knew in this struggle. He was relentless and tireless in trying to stave off the eviction. He collapsed again in St. Mary Square. Wahat was a warrior, and now this warrior, this fierce, noble tribesman, wept in my arms. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's worth it. You know, people need to remember what it was, what the struggle was about, why we continue to do this, why we try to remember, why we try to commemorate events like this that may seem traumatic, but, you know, from our point of view, if you don't struggle and remember these things, the community doesn't grow. The community has to grow. And I saw that today with these young Soma, young people singing, and I guess it was kind of like a rap, you know, even though it was, you know, they were reading it. It was, to me, it was like a rap, which was telling the story like it was. And those are really important, why we need to tell these kinds of stories over and over again. Thank you.